Welcome back to Beyond Binary, where we decode the complex forces shaping our world. Today, we're tackling a topic that sits at the crossroads of economics, politics, and technology: tariffs. Those seemingly simple taxes on imports or exports that can ripple through entire economies. Tariffs aren't just numbers on a government ledger. They are levers of power, tools of negotiation, and catalysts for innovation or disruption. Let's explore their outcomes, and more importantly, what their future impacts could look like. At their core, tariffs are taxes imposed on imported goods. Governments use them to protect domestic industries, raise revenue, or respond to foreign policies. When a country slaps tariffs on steel or electronics, the immediate outcome is straightforward. Imported goods become more expensive. This protects local producers who can now compete on price. But what seems like a win for domestic industry is often far more complicated. One significant outcome is the price effect. When tariffs raise costs for imported materials, businesses relying on those materials, think car manufacturers needing foreign steel or tech firms sourcing chips, face higher production costs. That cost almost always passes down to consumers. For example, during past trade disputes between major economies, washing machines, aluminum cans, and even smartphones saw noticeable price hikes, not because manufacturing suddenly became harder, but because tariffs altered the cost structure. Another outcome is trade diversion. When tariffs make one supplier's products too expensive, companies look for alternative suppliers in other countries. This can benefit certain nations unexpectedly. For instance, if country A imposes tariffs on country B's textiles, suppliers in country C might step in, reshaping global supply chains. This diversion can create new opportunities for some countries, but may destabilize existing trade relationships. Then there's the retaliation effect. Countries rarely accept tariffs quietly. When one nation raises barriers, others often respond in kind. Trade wars are born this way. A historic example is the US-China trade tensions in the late 2010s, where tariffs on billions of dollars worth of goods spiraled into tit-for-tat measures. The outcome? Global stock markets wavered, farmers faced uncertainty, and tech giants had to rethink supply chains. Yet tariffs aren't always negative. They can protect nascent industries, a concept economists call infant industry protection. By shielding emerging sectors from global competition, tariffs can give them time to grow, innovate, and eventually compete internationally. Several now thriving industries in Asia benefited from such protection decades ago. But this is a delicate balance. Protection too long can breed inefficiency, complacency, and corruption. Tariffs also have geopolitical outcomes. They can be wielded as political tools to pressure adversaries, reward allies, or signal disapproval. In recent years, tariffs have been used to address not just trade imbalances, but also environmental and human rights concerns. For instance, carbon border adjustment mechanisms, essentially tariffs on goods from countries with lax environmental rules, are being considered to fight climate change. Now let's talk about the technological impact of tariffs. In a world of globalized supply chains, tariffs on semiconductors or rare earth minerals can have cascading effects. Think of how a tariff on lithium could affect electric vehicle production worldwide. Companies may respond by investing in domestic alternatives or developing new technologies to bypass constrained resources. In some cases, tariffs can unintentionally accelerate innovation, pushing industries to develop substitutes or automate processes to cut costs. Another key outcome is economic nationalism. Tariffs often stoke patriotic rhetoric. Buy local, protect our jobs. While this can boost domestic morale and industries in the short term, it risks fragmenting the global economy. Historically, periods of high tariff barriers, like the 1930s Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act in the United States, are associated with reduced global trade and slower economic growth. Economists warn that widespread tariff use could recreate such conditions, especially as nations adopt more self-reliant stances after recent global disruptions. Looking to the future, what impacts could tariffs have? The first is on global supply chains. The pandemic and subsequent trade disputes already taught companies that over-reliance on one region is risky. Future tariffs could accelerate the trend of friendshoring or nearshoring, where businesses source goods from politically stable or geographically closer partners. Supply chains could become shorter, more regional, and ironically, less efficient. Another future impact could be on technology and automation. Higher tariffs increase production costs, motivating companies to automate factories or adopt AI-driven logistics to maintain profit margins. This could lead to fewer traditional manufacturing jobs but more demand for tech-savvy workers. We should also consider climate policy. As nations aim for net zero emissions, carbon-based tariffs could become widespread. Imagine a world where every product's price includes its carbon footprint. Countries with greener energy grids would gain a competitive edge, while carbon-heavy producers might face exclusion from lucrative markets. In finance, tariffs could influence currency markets. If tariffs slow trade, they can affect exchange rates, foreign investment, and even the stability of emerging economies dependent on exports. Investors and central banks watch tariff announcements closely, knowing they can trigger capital flows and market volatility. The geopolitical landscape will also shift. Tariffs could create new alliances, countries pooling together to counter a dominant economy's trade policies. Alternatively, they could deepen rivalries, fueling economic cold wars. As nations like India, Brazil, and African economies rise, their tariff policies will shape not just trade, but diplomatic dynamics. There's also a digital dimension to the future of tariffs. As digital goods, AI services, and data become valuable commodities, nations are debating how to impose tariffs on things that aren't shipped in containers. Will there be tariffs on cloud computing services or AI-generated content? Some experts predict a new frontier of data tariffs, where access to datasets or algorithms is regulated like oil or steel once was. But we must also consider unintended consequences. If tariffs become widespread in emerging technologies, like quantum computing components or biotech materials, innovation could slow down. Companies might hesitate to share breakthroughs across borders. This could fragment global scientific collaboration at a time when humanity needs cooperation on climate change, healthcare, and cybersecurity. The future isn't entirely grim, though. Tariffs can be used strategically to encourage sustainable practices. Green tariffs could incentivize cleaner manufacturing or fair labor standards worldwide. With careful planning, tariffs could become a tool for positive change rather than a blunt instrument of protectionism. Ultimately, tariffs are not relics of an old economic order. They are evolving instruments of power in a hyper-connected world. Whether they create prosperity or conflict will depend on how nations wield them, and whether they're paired with diplomacy, innovation, and foresight. As technology continues to blur borders and accelerate change, the challenge will be balancing national interests with global stability. The next time you hear about a tariff dispute on the news, remember, behind the headlines lie complex systems of economics, politics, and technology. Tariffs aren't just taxes. They're signals about the kind of future nations are trying to build. Will we see a fragmented world of competing economic blocs or a cooperative network using tariffs for good? That answer isn't set in stone. Thanks for watching Beyond Binary, where curiosity meets clarity. If you found this deep dive valuable, hit like, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more insights on the technologies and forces shaping our future. The world isn't waiting, so neither should your understanding.